Welcome everybody to another episode of Fins Nation. I'm your host, Louis Sung, and today we're going to be discussing the Dalvin Cook rumors that seem to be resurfacing. So a lot of stuff is going around with the Minnesota Vikings. What's going on with Dalvin Cook? Are the Dolphins going to trade for him? Are the Dolphins going to sign him if he is released? A lot of different rumors going around all over again. So we'll once again discuss the running back position and the situation with Dalvin Cook. But before that, really quick, just want to go ahead and mention this show is brought to you by our friends and sponsors, You Brake Wheel Fix. You Brake Wheel Fix is the complete automotive wheel solution. Ever parked too close to the sidewalk curb? You Brake Wheel Fix specializes in the repair of damaged wheels from bends, cracks, curb rash, and any other things you have to deal with. Or maybe your wheels are faded or peeling. You don't need to replace them, as You Brake Wheel Fix can refinish them to like new. Offering complete refinish options through powder coating, machining, and polishing, You Brake Wheel Fix is the answer to all of your wheel needs. And if you're just looking to give your ride a new look, You Brake Wheel Fix also offers many car customizing options, such as new custom wheels and tires from your favorite brands, performance upgrades, window tinting, and suspension modifications. Located just south of Aventura, you can reach Mark and his staff at 305-748-0112. Again, that's 305-748-0112, or online at youbrakewheelfix.com. They are really active on all social media platforms at You Brake Wheel Fix, so shoot them a DM on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter and get an estimate in just minutes. So don't delay, go to You Brake Wheel Fix and start customizing your ride to show up your Dolphins fandom today. This show is also brought to you by PrizePicks.com. PrizePicks.com is a revolutionary fantasy platform where you can now pick up to 6 different players across professional sports leagues. Whether that's the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, one of each, it's totally up to you to decide. All you have to do is choose whether your chosen player will get more or less than their projected stat. They give you free squares, special Taco Tuesday promos, Flex Friday specials, to where you can get your money back if you lose, or multiply the amount of money you can normally win. With offers like that, it's hard to justify not signing up if you're a fantasy fan. So what are you waiting for? Use the promo code 5, that's F-I-V-E, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up. So you get a free $100 courtesy of PrizePicks when you deposit $100 when you sign up using the promo code 5. So go ahead and head on over to PrizePicks.com right now and get started today. So just when you thought it was safe to get back in the water, here comes the Dalvin Cook story again. So there were reports earlier this offseason that the Miami Dolphins were interested in trading for Dalvin Cook because it seemed like Dalvin Cook was on his way out in Minnesota. Then things seemed to cool down a little bit once the Miami Dolphins brought back Raheem Mostert, they brought back Jeff Wilson, they brought back Savon Ahmed, and they even brought back Myles Gaskin on top of all that. So it seemed like the Dolphins were pretty much content to just roll with this current crew. So bringing back the whole running back room, you figure, okay, the job is done. They're satisfied with what they have. Maybe they'll bring in a rookie, an undrafted one even, and that'll be the end of the discussion. Not to mention that when the Dolphins traded for Jalen Ramsey, you would think that that would knock out any kind of Dalvin Cook stuff. Because how many players can you even trade for? You don't have assets to get everybody out there. And yet here we are again. We're discussing Dalvin Cook. Why are we discussing Dalvin Cook all over again? I had said in previous shows that I understood why the idea of a big name at running back felt like it would be the missing piece of the puzzle. Because again, we'll discuss this real quick. If it had been somebody like Derrick Henry, who was also rumored to be on the trade block and also rumored to go to Miami, or if it was somebody like an Austin Eckler, who also had rumors of potentially coming to Miami, because that's how these things work, right? Basically every single free agent all of a sudden magically wants to come to Miami. Of course, there is something to be said about the whole hometown discount thing. Cook was born in Opelika, he attended Miami Central High School, and he went to college at Florida State. So it makes sense that he would want to come back home and play for the Miami Dolphins. And at the very least, the rumors that the Dolphins were looking to trade for him apparently were true. Barry Jackson reported not that long ago that the Miami Dolphins had offered a trade to the Vikings to acquire Dalvin Cook. But ultimately what killed it was that the Minnesota Vikings and the Miami Dolphins couldn't come to terms on what kind of a draft pick would actually go to the Vikings. So if that's the case, then that probably means that the Vikings were looking for something more for their star running back than what the Dolphins were willing to offer. Okay, that sort of thing happens all the time. Instead, we were able to get our hands on Jalen Ramsey, a cornerback, for a third-round pick, and Hunter Long. Who knows what the Vikings were asking for? And it's not like the Dolphins have a whole lot of draft assets left at this point anyway. But now we have these rumors that the Vikings are just going to cut him. Does this mean that the Dolphins were literally the only team who were willing to give up anything for Dalvin Cook? And if that is the case, would it not make sense for the Minnesota Vikings to go ahead and just trade Dalvin Cook and get whatever they could out of him instead of just letting him go test the open market and taking the loss? Because if you trade him, you can at least get something. Even a 7th round pick is better than cutting a guy and saying, you know what, it's not worth it to just keep you around. It doesn't make sense for the Vikings to hang on to Dalvin Cook if they don't want to use him. If they really want to just move on from him, then they should just move on from him. The Dolphins, from what we can tell, based on what reports we're seeing, there is no real competition. So there's no reason for the Dolphins to compete against themselves. So maybe they're just holding it down, waiting to see what happens. And again, they do have Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson sitting there in the background. Maybe they'd have no desire to rush things. Maybe if they feel like, you know what, we have our running backs from last year who did a pretty good job. We don't necessarily need Dalvin Cook. If we could get Dalvin Cook, that would be fantastic. We would love to have that kind of a luxury. And mind you, it's not like Dalvin Cook is necessarily a super fit for what the Miami Dolphins offense is based on. But in the same vein that Jalen Ramsey isn't necessarily the best fit on paper for what it is the Dolphins were trying to do on defense, you could also make the argument that even though Dalvin Cook doesn't necessarily fit what it is the Miami Dolphins are trying to do on offense, well, neither did Derrick Henry, but people were really excited about that. Dalvin Cook is primarily a power runner. He doesn't exactly fit the mold for what the Miami Dolphins are looking for on offense. But you know what? Sometimes really good players just take precedence over scheme fit. This is something that I had talked about briefly. What is more important? Finding good players, finding elite level talent, and then making it work after the fact, or finding players who fit your scheme. The balance, I think, is if you can find elite level talent and it's unquestionably elite, then you just go ahead and get them. That's what the Jalen Ramsey thing was to me. There's no question what kind of a player Jalen Ramsey is. Jalen Ramsey is an elite level cornerback when he's healthy. You could argue the same for Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook is considered one of the best running backs in the NFL when he's healthy. And that's really been his main issue, is that he hasn't been healthy. There have been several reports that Dalvin Cook was playing through mostly just endless amounts of pain because he's basically playing with only one shoulder. Presumably, we're now hearing that Dalvin Cook is healthy, that he's healing up very nicely, and that he's going to be ready to go when the season starts. If that's true, then the Miami Dolphins would have a star running back. But would that not then mean that they're going to dump the idea of running back by committee? Are you going to make it now so that Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson are just change of pace backs? If that's what you're doing, then I guess in a way it's good that you're hedging your bets. Maybe you can give Raheem Mostert the kick returning duties or something along those lines if you have Dalvin Cook acting as your star running back. It offers some versatility to what you can do on special teams, I suppose. But part of me just feels like that's not what they should be aiming for. Again, I would love to have a Dalvin Cook, and if they can get him at a good price, I'm not going to be upset about it. Far from it, in fact. I would be very happy if they can get their hands on Dalvin Cook, because you could argue that that would be the one missing piece on offense besides right tackle itself. Everybody knows what kind of a player Dalvin Cook is. Dalvin Cook is a fantastic rusher. He's a great running back, and he even burned the Dolphins last season, in spite of the fact that he only had one shoulder. So he would be a fantastic addition. And who knows? Just this last show, I mentioned that Joe Burrow has someone like Joe Mixon that he can hand off the ball to at any given moment. And if he wanted to, he could run for over 1,000 yards. Well, let's just go through some stats for Dalvin Cook real quick, just for the sake of argument. Let's say the Miami Dolphins do go through with this. Maybe they can come to terms with the Vikings, and maybe the Vikings take something like a draft pick in 2024 or something along those lines, so that the Dolphins can keep all of their current draft picks. Let's just take a look at some of the stats for Dalvin Cook real quick, just to give everybody a refresher on what it is we're looking at. Statistically speaking, Dalvin Cook is a very impressive running back, and he has made the Pro Bowl in the past 4 seasons that he has been in the NFL. So in 2019, this is when he really started to kick off, right? So with 14 games that he played, he ran 250 times and ran for 1,135 yards with 13 touchdowns. He averaged 4.5 yards a carry. 2020, again, made the Pro Bowl, 14 games played. So he's been injured. 312 rushing attempts, 1,557 yards, 16 touchdowns at 5 yards per carry. 2021, he played in only 13 games. Again, injuries. 249 attempts, 1,159 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns, 4.7 yards per carry. And finally, last season, 2022, he played in all 17 games, so kudos to him on that. 264 rushing attempts, 1,173 yards, 8 touchdowns, 4.4 yards per carry. So the last 4 seasons, in spite of the fact, and including last season, which included Alexander Mattinson actually getting some carries from him, he was still able to rush for over 1,000 yards in the last 4 seasons. And this is supposedly with him injured, right? This is supposedly with a shoulder that was not at 100% health at any point during the last season. If this is true, and the Dolphins would be getting a healthy Dalvin Cook, this is essentially what the Dolphins would be missing on offense. Somebody who's truly dangerous, somebody who is truly going to make the other team look and think twice before selling out to stop the likes of Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle from running all over the field. Because if all Tua has to do is hand off the ball to Dalvin Cook, and suddenly their whole defensive strategy is blown out of the water because now they can't stop him, that would be the exact type of offense that Joe Burrow has had the benefit of playing in. Weapons on every side of the field, and that would be exactly what they're looking for, right? That would be the end to the Dolphins' problems. And this would basically guarantee a run at the playoffs, or at the very least an AFC championship game. Now the question becomes, how likely is this to happen? Just how likely is it to happen at this point? Because he's still under contract with the Vikings. And he's slated to make a lot of money. And that's probably the main reason why the Vikings will be looking to dump him, because they do not want to pay him the amount of money that he's going to be making. He's going to be 28 years old very soon, and everybody knows that when it comes to running backs, you're practically an old man at that point. I personally disagree with that notion that just because you're older means that you don't have anything left to offer. I've always hated that whole idea. I've always hated this notion that once you hit a certain age, your time is up as a running back. Raheem Mostert is even older than Dalvin Cook, and he almost ran for 1,000 yards last season, splitting time with Chase Edmonds and Jeff Wilson. If Mostert had gotten more carries, he could have easily rushed for over 1,000 yards in this offense. And Raheem Mostert, as much as I love the guy, he is not the talented player like Dalvin Cook is. Dalvin Cook has made the Pro Bowl for the past 4 seasons and supposedly injured. So I refuse to sit here and act like, oh, well, Dalvin Cook's getting up there in years. So is Derrick Henry. Nobody's bothering Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is still an amazing player. And the only reason teams aren't willing to trade for him, I imagine, is, again, this dichotomy against older running backs. But I can guarantee you this. If the Tennessee Titans ever decided to cut Derrick Henry for whatever ungodly reason, there would be a line of teams all getting ready to try to throw an offer at him to get him on their team. Because Derrick Henry is still Derrick Henry. And he has not shown any signs of not being Derrick Henry. Again, I say, this whole idea of you're old, so you're no good anymore. Sometimes elite level players, do you want the elite player or do you not? If you do not, then don't pay him, but don't expect to be surprised when they decide they don't want to play for you. And a lot of teams miss out on some really good players because they don't want to pay up for a guy who, yes, he's a little bit up there in age, but you know what? He's been productive and he hasn't shown any signs of not being productive. I sincerely doubt that it's just the Minnesota Vikings system that has made Dalvin Cook such an amazing player. Because you do not rush for over 1,000 yards in the last 4 seasons and make the Pro Bowl every single year just because you just happen to be a Minnesota Viking. That's very rare for the system to be so incredible that anybody can look good in it. Now, I realize that that's kind of ironic to say, given that the San Francisco 49ers rushing game made the likes of Raheem Mostert look good, and Jeff Wilson, and other guys that are on that roster even today. So it's very ironic, I suppose you could say. But nevertheless, think about it. If Dalvin Cook was in this system, how many yards could he rush for? If he rushes for over 1,000 yards, and if Dalvin Cook goes down, you still have Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson waiting in the wings to come and take over, that running game is set. And then the Dolphins would be free to take somebody like a Sam Laporta at 51, and then whatever other players are necessary with the last few picks that they have. Or ideally, again, if you really want to fix that right tackle position, maybe you can draft someone like a DeJuan Jones. Or, and perhaps I'm being a little harsh on him, I've been talking down Matthew Bergeron because I think he's a project, but our own Hussam Patel of the scouting combine seems to think that Bergeron would be a perfect fit for what the Dolphins do. Now, when it comes to things like the draft, I tend to default to other people who know more than I do when it comes to player evaluation. So, if Hussam thinks that there's something to Matthew Bergeron, I at least have to look at it and try to see what it is that he is seeing. I've also seen other people that I respect say the opposite, that Bergeron is not particularly special. So again, that's why I have to try to look for it at myself and see, okay, well, what exactly is it that I'm looking at? I am not a draft expert, but you can be darn sure that I will look at any player that you ask me to, and I will try to see, okay, what is it that I'm looking at? Do I like what I'm seeing? Do I know the eye test? That's what I use. I use the eye test. Do I like what I'm looking at? And that's what made me realize that Austin Jackson, during the New England Patriots game, actually looked pretty good. And that same eye test is what showed me that when he came back against the Houston Texans, oh, it was a miserable experience to watch. The difference was very obvious. So I can at least do that much. I can at least tell you if I like a player or not. So I'll take a look at Matthew Bergeron. I'll take a look at DeJuan Jones. I'll look at these guys and say, you know what, maybe there is something there. But forgive me if I'm still a little skeptical because, again, if you're looking for projects, the Dolphins already have a project. His name is Austin Jackson. They also have a project named Liam Eichenberg, so they can do that as well. But back to the whole Dalvin Cook thing. My personal opinion on this is if I'm the Miami Dolphins, I would be willing to trade a future draft pick to get Dalvin Cook. And that is with the proviso that they are able to restructure him and make it so that he's not going to cost as much against the salary cap, obviously. Because, much like the Vikings, I do not necessarily want to give Dalvin Cook a ton of money, but I'd be willing to keep him on the team. So it's kind of the same issue. In one breath, I'm saying that I don't think that just because you're older means that you're bad, but at the same time, if every single other team in the NFL doesn't seem very interested in this guy, there must be something that I'm missing. And I really doubt that it's just age, because this is still a dude who has run for over 1,000 yards in the last 4 seasons. I would be willing to pay Dalvin Cook a pretty penny. Just not all at once, I guess, is the way I would put it. But if the Vikings do release him, I am sure that there are going to be other teams offering Dalvin Cook contracts, saying, please come and play for my team. Who knows? Maybe Dalvin Cook will take a look at the whole Jalen Ramsey situation and say, you know what? Jalen had the right idea. I'm going to go back home and play for Miami while I still can, because these guys are going to make me look really good in this offense. If he looks at it in that way, maybe he will take a hometown discount. You know how it goes with the Miami Dolphins. The no state income tax, you get to be home, you get to have all these factors thrown in. People like playing in Miami now, and especially for Mike McDaniel. People like Mike McDaniel, and they like the offense that they have put together. The Dolphins recently signed Chosen Anderson, formerly known as Robbie Anderson. He wanted to come to Miami. There must be something there that people are liking about these guys. So maybe Dalvin Cook looks at it and says, you know what? Let's do it. Let's go and push for a Super Bowl. Again, I submit to you all. All Tua Tagovailoa has to do is stay healthy. Everything else will take care of itself. This team is stacked. It really is. And as long as he's there to lead the way, it's hard for me to look at anything on this offense and say, you know what, there's the weak spot, except for the offensive line. That's the only thing you can look at. Because if Dalvin Cook becomes the Miami Dolphins running back, which if they can pull it off and get a good deal for him, I will be very happy. I don't think it's necessary, but it would be a great luxury to have. If Dalvin Cook joins the Miami Dolphins, then teams beware. Because Dalvin Cook, again, can run for 1,000 yards whenever he feels like it. And Tua has shown that if you give him weapons, he will find guys in the open field. And having Dalvin Cook would just make defenses that much more nervous. Because if you sell out to stop Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and then you add Chosen Anderson to that mix and Braxton Berrios to that list, who's stopping Dalvin Cook? All Tua has to do is say, oh, you know what? They've gone ahead and they've gone into cover 2 over the top trying to stop Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill from burning them. So I'll just turn around and hand the ball off to Dalvin Cook, and he'll run for 6 yards at least because they didn't leave anybody in the box to stop him. It's the perfect scheme. So we'll see what the Dolphins do. That's going to be it for this show. Thank you all so much for listening, as always. So we'll see what the Dolphins do. The draft is rapidly approaching, and we're going to have more content for you coming up very soon, especially draft content, because even if the Miami Dolphins don't get a first-round draft pick this year, that doesn't mean that there's no chance of big moves. You know how Chris Greer gets. He could pull off a massive draft day trade that nobody sees coming, and the Miami Dolphins will be all the better for it. This is it. This is the year. You can tell in the way that they're building this roster. They are going for it all this year. And you know what? It's about darn time, because I think we've waited long enough for what should be the Super Bowl run. If you haven't already done so, go check out U Break Wheel Fix if you have any wheel needs, or if you want to just go ahead and get some performance upgrades or window tinting or suspension modifications. You can go to U Break Wheel Fix. They can help you with all of that. They're located just south of Aventura, so go ahead and reach Mark and his staff at 305-748-0112 or online at ubreakwheelfix.com, or you can hit them up on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Use the DM to go get in touch with them. They'll give you an estimate in just minutes. Don't delay. Go to U Break Wheel Fix and customize your ride today. And of course, PrizePicks.com. If you haven't gone there already to take advantage of the offers that they have, use the promo code 5, that is FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up. Again, you deposit $100 using our promo code 5, FIVE, and they will give you $100 on their dime so that you can play with their money before you even start using your money. So if you can get some early wins in, you'll be rolling in dough in no time. So again, that's PrizePicks.com. Use the promo code 5, that's FIVE. We will see you all tomorrow for more Fins Nation.